What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fatal Garage. I'm Josh Thornell, and today's episode we're going to be working on my buddy Will's 2018 BMW M2, replacing its brakes, brake pads, and brake fluid and brake lines. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first step was obviously to get the BMW up onto jack stands. The front and the rear, we ended up using the front center jack point, which is underneath the front. It was pretty hard to get to. You're going to need a very low profile jack to get to it. And then on the rear, we're able to use one side and then putting the jack stands underneath the rear subframe. So starting up here with the front passenger side brake caliper, we're going to go ahead and change the brake pads. The first piece to do here is to remove these two pins. What you're going to want to do is get a punch, and you want to hit right on the tip of that pin. Keeping in mind, especially if you're working on someone else's car, to not hit the paint of the caliper. Next, you want to pull the pins out from the back. Then you're going to pull out this metal clip as well that was holding the two pins were holding this clip in. Then what you're going to want to do is grab these two tabs here and pull them in, and what this is doing is compressing your pistons. That way you have room to be able to get your pads out and be able to slide in the thicker pads in. Do that to the other side. And the old pads are out. Now before we go ahead and put the new brake pads back in here, we're going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit just to make it a little bit cleaner. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab here a microfiber cloth and spray a little bit of some quick detailer just on the cloth itself, and then kind of wipe everything down a little bit. I also like to grab the pins that we pulled out, and I like to wipe these down as well, just because they get a lot of brake dust and corrosion on them. And then finally the bracket. You don't need to wipe this down. I just like to get a little bit of the brake dust just off of it. So our calipers were pressed out a little bit, so I just went in here with my fingers and kind of just pressed them in, be able to slide in our pad a little bit easier. Now we're going to go ahead and add in our new pads into the brake caliper, sliding in the rear one first. Then we'll go ahead and slide in the other one. Now that we got the pads in, let's go ahead and get this clip in. I like to just put the clip in on the bottom piece first. I like to slide through the pin as well, which kind of holds it in place. We'll go ahead and put the top pin in. What you'll need to do is flex this bracket piece a little bit. That way it can slide over and be able to pick up that pin. Now we need to go ahead and hammer the pins the rest of the way in. What I like to do is use the same punch that I used to get the pins out in the first place. I like to use the square head of it, and I hold it flat against the pin, and then I take my hammer and I tap against that. And just like that, your front brake pads are done. Okay, now that we finished up the front brake pads, we're going to go ahead and start with the rear passenger side. First step is to remove the two front pins. Now we got the pins out, we'll go ahead and squeeze our piston in using our same method that we used on the front, using the brake pad. And then we'll be able to pull out the brake pad. Keep in mind this rear one does have a sensor here for when you get down to your brake loss, so you will need to remove that and transfer that over to your new brake pad. Or if you got a new sensor, if you already hit it, then you'll need to replace this. Now that we have the brakes all out, let's go ahead and clean this up just like we did the front end. We need to go ahead and slide in this sensor here for the brake wear. And you can hear it just snapping in right there. First brake pad in. Second brake pad in. Bracket here that goes in the center. Pin, start to feed that through the bottom. Go ahead and slide in your top pin. Now that we got our pins in, just like we did on the front, we need to go ahead and hammer them in using the same punch that we utilized on the other side. Now that we hammered in the rear pins, the rear brake is now complete. We're going to go ahead and do the driver's side, and then we'll meet you guys up in the front, and we're going to go ahead and start doing the brake lines as well. So something I wanted to touch on real quick right before we're finishing up this last front brake caliper here is before you start hammering in the pins that come across down here and here, is you want to make sure that the pin comes all the way across the brake caliper through where it's supposed to on this bracket and into the caliper on the other side before you start hammering, just to make sure that it lines up and everything else. Sometimes you might need to push on the pin as well to help you line up, or the bracket to help you line up the pin before you start sliding it over there. Alright guys, so we're finally able to finish up the brake pads here on the M2. Now we're going to go ahead and jump in and do the brake lines themselves, and then also do a fluid flush with RBF600 fluid. So it's going to be a pretty fun process, and we'll meet you back up here at the front wheel. Okay guys, so starting up here at the front passenger side wheel, we're going to go ahead and do the brake line and brake fluid flush. So what we'll notice here is the brake line itself connects down to the caliper with just a 14 bolt down there, it is a 14 on the line. So coming up from the caliper itself, the brake line comes over and across here. There's a little clip here that'll be the first piece that we'll actually take off, and then the brake line continues up and then connects into the hard line system over here, which we need to disconnect from here, undo the clip in the center, and then undo it from the caliper itself, and then we'll be able to put in the new line. Alright, so first piece is go ahead and remove this clip, and we got it. So this is what that clip looks like that we just pulled out. Okay, now that we've got that clip removed, you're able to pick up the line here, essentially push it out, pick it up and move it out of the way. Now it's able to just freely move. Next up, we'll be doing the clip that's up on top that connects to the hard line. And this is, we're going to use an adjustable end wrench on the bottom one, and then also a number 11 on the top piece that connects to the hard line itself. Now we're going to start working with the brake fluid as well. Make sure you have some sort of drip tray below, just in case. And then what you want to do is you want to take your line, now that you disconnected it, and take that open end and drip it down into the bucket. And that way, hopefully any fluid that's still in your line will drip down into the bucket, obviously not all over you. Next up will be to remove the 14 millimeter down from the caliper itself. And unfortunately this twists the entire line, so just be careful with the other end that you're not flinging it around and getting brake fluid everywhere. Okay, and just like that, our first line is off. Now we're going to go over here and quickly start putting on our new line. Connecting at the caliper first. Alright, now we want to go ahead and tighten up that bolt, which is a 14, again connecting to the caliper. Just going to use a nugga-dugga. Now we're connecting obviously to the top part, to the hard line, and tightening down that 11 millimeter from the hard line. Now our brake lines are tight on the top. Now we're going to go ahead and slip this back into this bracket here, and then we have a new pin or a new clip, making sure that the face of the clip on this side is the side that's going flat against the bracket here to be able to push against the pin. And with that, your front brake line is done. Alright guys, so back here at the rear, we're actually going to go ahead and start up top with a 10 millimeter attaching to the hard line, and then also an adjustable end wrench onto the soft line here as well to hold it in place as we undo that. Okay, and like that we have our top of our line disconnected, and now we have the 14 that connects down to the caliper. And again, when you're undoing this 14, you're going to want to make sure that you're holding the brake line. That way it's just dripping down into the bucket and not just flinging everywhere. And then just drop the brake line into the bucket now that it's off. Now we're going to go over here and grab our new brake line to put on. Again, starting with the bottom with that 14 millimeter. Tighten up that 14 on the bottom. And then go ahead up top. Slide this through the hole. Tighten this number 11 on the top end. Okay. And then just double check your 14 on the bottom. And then just give everything a clean up and you're good to go. Now our rear end is complete. All right guys, so we just finished up the passenger side of the M2 for the brake lines. The brake pads were already done earlier, obviously. So now we're gonna go over here and do the driver's side. I'm gonna have Will do the driver's side, as you can see, so he's getting his stuff ready to go. He's gonna start with the rear line first, and then we're gonna work on our way on the front. And then when we'll be back to meet up with you guys, we're gonna go ahead and bleed the system. All right guys, so we went ahead and we finished up the driver's side brake lines. So now we're back up here at the front. We're about to bleed the brakes. Since we want to go ahead and put in new fluid throughout the entire system, Will is right now going through and kind of taking a turkey baster and getting out the old fluid from the reservoir. Now we're going to go ahead and hook up our power bleeder, put it up to 10 psi, go around and check our lines, see if there's any leaks, and then we'll go ahead and fill it up and start to bleed the brakes. All right guys, so we just hooked up our Motiv Products power bleeder to the brake reservoir. We charged it up to 10 psi, and we just checked all of our lines that we disconnected and put on the new lines. We're not seeing any leaks or bubbles or anything like that forming, so we're gonna go ahead, release the pressure on this, put about a half a bottle of brake fluid into this power bleeder, and then recharge the system to 10 pounds of psi. And then we'll go ahead around from starting with the furthest from the ABS block, which will be your passenger rear on this car, and then your driver rear, and then your front passenger, and then your front driver, and we'll go ahead and bleed the brakes. Okay guys, so moving around here to the back end, around the rear passenger side, which is the furthest from the ABS sensor, which is where you want to start. We located our bleed screw here for the brakes, which is right here behind the caliper. There's a plastic cover that you need to remove, and then you'll be able to see the nipple right there. Now what you want to do, if you have a Motiv Products, which I really recommend these guys, link in the description will be below if you guys want to pick one of these up. But this thing is fantastic. So what you do, now you have this and it has a looped hose. All you do, slide over in the open hose onto your brake caliper nipple itself. Set the bleed bottle behind it. You want it basically just higher than where you have your brake bleeder at. That way air doesn't go back into your brakes. And then we'll go ahead and crack open the bleed screw. Like so. And now we're just waiting for fluid to come through. We're waiting for the line to clear out. We don't want any bubbles going through the fluid at all. We want to make sure it's nice and clean. Still able to see a few. I like to also tap on the brake calipers a little bit. And what that does is also break up any air that might be trapped in a cavity within your brake caliper. But our fluid looks like to be really clean. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this back up. Go ahead and tighten up your bleed screw once you're done. And you'll know once you're done basically when you have clean fluid running throughout the whole line and you see no more bubbles coming through or dirt or anything else that you may have in there. Now once that's complete, all you do is I like to lower the bottle a little bit lower than your brake caliper. And then as you're pulling off this, you squeeze the tube, pull off, and then release it. The fluid goes down into the bottle, cap the bottle, like so. And then you're good to, oh, that didn't work. You cap the bottle like so. Now the fluid can't go anywhere and you're free to move on to your next one. Each time you go ahead and switch between a wheel to a wheel, come back over to your power bleeder and make sure that you're still at that 10 pounds. It does fluctuate every time, obviously, you bleed a brake. That pressure leaves through the brake caliper when you're bleeding it. So you just want to make sure to come back here, make sure you're still at that 10 pounds. So when you go ahead to breathe the next brake, you still got that pressure. Okay, so now we're back up here at the front, starting with the front passenger side. We already did the rear passenger side, and we've already done the rear driver side brakes. And then the last brake after this will be the front driver side brake. Now your first piece you want to do is, obviously on this caliper, there's actually 2 bleed valves, one here on the inside, and then one here as well on the outside. You want to start with the outside first, and then on the inside, obviously because this is the furthest away from your ABS line versus this. So go ahead and pop the cover. Go ahead and put on our Motul Products bottle. For the sake of this one, I'm actually just going to hold the bottle. We saw a lot of bubbles coming through early on and starting to look pretty clean. I'm going to go ahead and tap on the caliper. Like I said, I like to do this just to get any other air bubbles that may be caught up in the caliper in any way and give them an opportunity to escape. All right, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and tighten down the bleed screw. Go ahead and drop the bottle a little bit. Raise this up. Let the fluid run into the bottle. Cap it as I go to the rear screw. I like to just double check that these are tight as well before I move on to the next one. Moving on back to the rear side. Repeat the process. Now the inside should be able to be a lot quicker just because you already did the outside of the caliper, which is where the majority of your air bubbles are going to be trapped at. And again, I like to just tap on this brake caliper to get any sort of air bubbles out of here. All right, the fluid looks all pretty clean. Go ahead and tighten this line back up. And again, take off the power bleeder. Letting it drip down. Replace the cap. Put to the side. Put the cap back on the nipple. And then, like I said, I like to double check these again. Do a little wipe real quick, just to get any fluid that may be on here. And we're good to go. Now your front passenger side is done. We bled the brakes, we did the brake pads. Now all we have is the front driver side left to do, and then we should be good to go to take this out for a ride. All right, guys, so we just wrapped up the brake job here on this M2. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys liked everything you guys saw, feel free to give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more content just like this, feel free to smash that subscribe button. And like I said, everything you guys saw in today's video will be linked in the descriptions below, and that does help out the channel. And just like that, I'm out.